More Pascal Siakam trade rumors have come out, as apparently the Atlanta Hawks are now a team that's trying to acquire the Toronto Raptors' top star. So we'll discuss that, including an update regarding Fred VanVleet's contract situation, as we have some details about the number of years he's likely to receive, how much money will be, and if it will be from the Toronto Raptors. Additionally, another team has come into the mix, trying to swoop up Scoop Henderson, one of those top 3 selections, and OG Anunoby to the Kings seems to be shot down due to the Kings holding out a major asset. So lots of stuff to discuss. Without further ado, let's jump to the first topic of discussion. The first thing we're taking a look at is Pascal Siakam. An update as the Atlanta Hawks are looking to acquire Pascal Siakam. Now, there's been a lot of rumors regarding Pac, especially involving the deal with Scoot Henderson, a top 3 pick going to Portland, maybe the Charlotte Hornets and the Raptors sliding in to get one of those top selections. But now, another team has sort of jumped in the mix for Pascal Siakam, as Jake Fisher gave a pretty deep dive on the Toronto Raptors today, saying that one player is believed to be on the Hawks' radar and potential trade targets is Raptors forward Pascal Siakam. And Toronto marks another team front offices are closely monitoring for trade activity. Similar to the team's position leading up to the trade deadline, the Raptors are said to be still deliberating on various pathways to proceed with their roster. One North Star remains Scotty Barnes as the future engine of the offense under coach Darko Rajakovic, but sources from there said from there, Toronto has to weigh decisions on Pascal, Fred VanVleet, OG Anunoby, and Gary Trent Jr. So, Fisher also had more to say. We'll break it down in a later report, but Pascal Siakam, the Atlanta Hawks, which really seems interesting as there was some discussions about Trae Young potentially being dealt from the Atlanta Hawks a few months back, but I think that's kind of shot down. I think that's extremely unlikely. So if you take Trae Young out of the mix, out of the contention, what assets do the Atlanta Hawks really have? And they definitely have some decent players. I mean, Bogdanovic is on that roster. AJ Griffin is an interesting young player. John Collins is a guy the Hawks have been trying to trade for years now at this point. Clint Capella, Okongwu off the bench. There are some interesting players, but I'm sure every Raptors fan that heard that list of guys, outside of Trae Young, it's a pretty mid-level team. DeAndre Hunter has that potential, but again, he's dealt with injuries, was a former top pick, but hasn't blossomed into a star 3-and-D guy like some people hoped he would. Okongwu is a guy I'm still pretty high on, but again, 3-4 years into his NBA career, still hasn't taken that leap forward. It seems like one of those 6'9" bigs that Masai Ujiri would love to get, but I don't know if he'd be the perfect fit for this current roster, as we're sort of adding more of what we're trying to move away from at this point. But the Atlanta Hawks, they'd really have to aggregate a lot of their pieces, a lot of their talent in order to make a Pascal Siakam trade, in order to compete with the other rumors and the other reports we've heard from across the NBA. But the unfortunate thing for the Atlanta Hawks is they don't really have any of their draft picks, because last summer they traded away three picks for DeJounte Murray, leaving their other picks unavailable to sort of deal at this point. So, though all those guys are interesting, but DeJounte Murray is the other name that I want to sort of discuss in a potential Pascal Siakam trade, because he is a guy that I think could be a realistic get and would be a good fit for the Toronto Raptors. I mean, he plays defense, he knocks down threes, he's a great facilitator. He was an all-star 2 seasons ago on that brutal San Antonio Spurs team, averaging nearly a triple-double. And the Toronto Raptors, if we are going to lose Fred VanVleet, desperately are going to need someone to come into that guard spot. And if it's not Scoot Henderson, DeJounte Murray coming into the Toronto Raptors would be a cool fit for this team. And obviously the Hawks didn't make the playoffs, or they made the playoffs, goodness gracious. I'm thinking of the Chicago Bulls right now. But the Hawks, they got knocked down in the first round this most recent season. So Siakam seems like a better fit there. If DeJounte Murray came in, I'd like some additional assets on top of it. But that could be a cool piece for the Toronto Raptors to add if a potential Hawks trade does go down involving Pac. But I don't know. We'll see. I don't want any of the sort of Atlanta Hawks filler squad. I'd want DeJounte Murray because they don't have any other picks to really deal for the Toronto Raptors. But let me know what you guys think about a potential Pac for DeJounte Murray swap. I think that would be the coolest potential route to go with the Atlanta Hawks. The next thing we're taking a look at is Fred VanVleet's market is $30+ million per season. Now, we also, again, Jake Fisher dropped a lot of info today. Lots of updates regarding Toronto Raptors players. But Fred VanVleet, in recent weeks, he has been coveted by a lot of NBA teams, whether, most recently the Orlando Magic, Houston Rockets, LA Lakers, Phoenix Suns. Feels like every team in the NBA that has not an established point guard have expressed interest in Fred VanVleet over the past month, but he's an unrestricted free agent, and now we have some insights in terms of the contract he's likely to receive. And the Toronto Raptors is something they have to weigh seriously, as Bobby Webster said publicly they want to bring Fred VanVleet back, but given the upcoming salary cap changes where you have a lot of big contracts on your roster, you're not able to make certain trades, your hard cap, so you don't have a mid-level exception. Lots of weird stuff going on there, so we have to be careful who we're giving big money to, but it seems like Fred VanVleet's going to get big money in free agency. So apparently from Jake Fisher again saying that there indeed remains a possibility that Fred VanVleet will rejoin the Toronto Raptors after declining his player option to enter unrestricted free agency. Early indications are that any team hoping to land Fred VanVleet's services is going to have to surpass the 3 years, $90 million mark. While Trent still considers what to do with his own player option, the Raptors guard is expected to command at least $20 million average annual value, sources say. So, expected to command at least that, but Jake Fisher saying that a team that wants to acquire Fred VanVleet at this point is going to have to surpass 3 years, $90 million. Now, Fred VanVleet, I've said it on multiple occasions on this podcast. He's not a guy that I think is garbage. I think he's not a starting point guard in the NBA. None of that. But he's pretty much proven this season at least that he hasn't established himself as a guy that can be your number one, number two on even a playoff team or a true playoff team at this point. I guess he was a couple seasons ago on that playoff squad, but he's dealt with some injuries. His efficiencies are down, and yes, he can score. Yes, he can facilitate. Yes, he can defend in theory, where we saw in NBA Finals. But now at this point, right, he's not scoring efficiently enough. He's not facilitating from the eye test, especially in crunch moments, right, to the right players, and the defense. For most of this season, he had his nights this year where he got us all excited. Oh man, that was a defensive masterclass by Fred. But more nights than not, he was getting burned through by the other team's opposing guard. So $30 million for Fred, even though he's currently our team's leader, he won a championship and all that sort of stuff, is a lot of money. Now, the 3-year mark makes it a little bit less risky, right? It makes it a little bit more digestible to come in and say, okay, if it completely fails and stuff, then that is what it is. It's not like you're giving him a 5-year max or something along those lines, but $30 million plus per season for Fred VanVleet is something that I'm just not super comfortable with. Masai Ujiri inevitably has to make that decision, but maybe Jake Fisher said it could be closer to the 20 million plus range. I don't really know, but let me know what you guys think. What contract would you give Fred VanVleet to stay going into next season? Regardless of there's other offers. There's what number you'd like for him to be brought back at that's comfortable to you. I want to know that in the comment section below. The next thing we're taking a look at is the Raptors having competition for a top pick. Now, big topic of discussion. Scoot Henderson to the Toronto Raptors. Coming in, being that dog on the court, that athlete that can finish in the lane. Most people say he'd be a number one pick in most NBA drafts, but obviously Victor Wembanyama, unlikely to be the case. But apparently, other teams are trying to swoop in there for Scoot as well. We've heard about the Pelicans and potentially more offering a package. Other talks have said that they won't offer Zion Williamson, but others are saying they're gauging that possibility. So Zion's at the table. It's going to be tough for us to really compete with one of those offers, but apparently another team's trying to swoop in, and there's discussions going on, as apparently the Blazers and Wizards have discussed a trade centered around the number 3 pick and Kristaps Porzingis. Now, this one, sure, surface level, you might look at it like, oh, that's tough. A bidding war is happening for the number 3 overall pick, right? That's tougher for the Toronto Raptors, but no. If these are actual discussions going on, Kristaps Porzingis, Stinky Pinky, a guy that was traded for the worst contract in the NBA 2 seasons ago in Davis Bertans, and Spencer Dinwiddie, who is a role player at best, a fringe starter on most teams. He was traded for that a few seasons ago. Now, he's definitely redeemed his value a little bit there with the Washington Wizards. He's not the Kristaps Porzingis asset he was with the New York Knicks, but he definitely redeemed his value a little bit. But you don't jump from Davis Bertans to Pascal Siakam level trade asset in a season and a half playing on a garbage franchise. You just don't do that. So if there's legitimate discussions going on for the number 3 pick and Kristaps Porzingis, maybe that thing is a little bit more gettable than we were sort of expecting. Now, the Wizards also have a top 10 selection. I believe it's number 8 at this point in this year's NBA draft. So maybe it's Kristaps and number 8 for flip, for number 3. That's something that would be tougher to compete with, but obviously the Raptors have number 13. I think Siakam in 13 absolutely blows that offer out of the water, in my opinion. So, Kristaps is good. He's solid, but he deals with a lot of injuries. He's a big man that loves to just shoot and huck up threes. Sure, he can block some shots and stuff, but I don't know. Pascal Siakam's a much better defender, much better offensive player, and it just makes more sense for the Portland Trail Blazers if a deal is going to go down. But maybe the asking price is lower, and Masai Ujiri's playing hardball why a deal hasn't happened. Again, I'm still not sold on selling Siakam straight up for the number 3 overall pick, but if it's doable, right, that's the route we want to go in, then, maybe you get Anthony Simons, some decent assets back on top of it. But let me know what you guys think of the Raptors bidding against Stinky Pinky, Kristaps Porzingis. I mean, we could have had him a couple seasons ago, but it is what it is. The next thing we're taking a look at is the Kings holding out a key asset for OG Anunoby. Most recent video, we discussed how the Kings were seriously interested in OG Anunoby, and given the wording of that report, I assume that they would offer a serious asset back to the Toronto Raptors in order to acquire OG Anunoby, but it doesn't seem like that's the case, as apparently news has come out that the Sacramento Kings are not including Keegan Murray in any trade discussions for OG. Again, they have some draft picks, they have some capital, they have some decent players, but if Keegan Murray's not in one of those deals, I just don't want to trade OG. So that's that. That's all I'm saying about that situation. Right off those Kings rumors, if that's the deal that they're going to be throwing at us. But the final thing we're talking about is a potential Kyle Lowry return. I'm just putting it on the radar. No official reports, no crazy stuff coming out saying Kyle Lowry's to the Raptors. But the Washington Wizards, we just discussed them, are trading away Bradley Beal. And the 2 finalists, Woj reported, had a little bomb come out today, that the Suns and the Miami Heat are 2 teams that are the finalists to acquire Bradley Beal. Now, the Suns could offer Landry Shamet and Chris Paul for Beal. Apparently, that's a package on the table, or just a straight-up Ayton for Beal swap. But the Miami Heat are offering a deal that would center around Kyle Lowry, potentially Duncan Robinson, one of those guys, and Beal going down there to Miami. Now, if Kyle Lowry's end up going to the Wizards, I don't imagine they'd want to keep him. I imagine they'd buy him out. I don't imagine Kyle Lowry would want to be on that squad. Now, maybe he'd go to a contender. Maybe he'd sign somewhere else, because the Toronto Raptors, as is, at the current moment, aren't a contender by any means, by any stretch of the imagination, but bringing back the Groat, at least for a season. I mean, we need another guard. We need someone that can play that guard position as a backup, as a starter, whatever. I'd like to see a little reunion after the grueling years we've seen with him gone. I'd like to see Kyle Lowry finish out his career as a Toronto Raptor, but again, not for $30 million per year, but something that I bought outright. I'm just throwing it out there on the radar. But folks, let me know what you guys think about all this Toronto Raptors news. You guys are the best for making it this far. Anyways, subscribe to the channel. We're really close to 28,000 subs. Anyways, I'm signing out. Cheers.